Hello, this is Amy with Toolbox Tarot, and I'm here to do a reading for the week of August 31st through September 6th, 2018. And this week I'm using the Slow Holler deck. Slow Holler is a queer collective of artists, and so there's several different people who've made cards. The deck is gender neutral, and they've renamed a lot of the cards. They've reordered the deck in a lot of ways. Reordered the suit. They've reordered the court cards, where the traditionally feminine matriarch cards anchor the suits. I might be giving you too much information, but they've also renamed the suits. Knives instead of swords, vessels instead of cups, branches instead of wands, and stones instead of pentacles. So anyway, it's just gorgeous, and I'm lucky to have gotten a copy of it. It's no longer available, and I understand it's really sought after, and I understand why it's really sought after. So let's get busy and do the reading. I'll choose 3 cards, and we'll take this opportunity to dig in and engage with life on a deeper level this week. And hopefully this will give you an opportunity to focus on some aspects that the cards are offering up for us. First card's Death. Second card is Four of Vessels. One more, please. This one. And Traveler of Stones. Okay, well, we've got a Major Arcana card, a numbered card, and a court card. In this deck, instead of knights, they use the word traveler. And otherwise, this is the nomenclature is pretty normal. So, let's look at this Death card. It's really beautiful. I feel like I could dig into, I guess is this a moth or is that a bee? I can't tell. If it was a moth, it would make more sense to me somehow, and I'm not sure exactly why I say that. I gotta put on my glasses and take a good look at this. It could be a cicada. I'd be interested if anybody's watching and wants to weigh in on what kind of critter that is. I would love to hear what you have to say. But the Death card really generally talks about a hard stop, the real end to something. I wouldn't put anything on it having to do with like physical death personally. But death is a metaphor, and not to take the power out of it by saying death is a metaphor, but to recognize that there are endings that are painful, and the wisdom of the card is that things have to die in order for other things to take root. And that's what's happening here with this beautiful poppy. And it's interesting that they chose, I read that as a poppy. I mean, what does Poppy... I think that that's really interesting. I don't know if that was a design choice. I trust these people well enough to say I don't think it was just a design choice. So Poppy's having to do with opium. So perhaps the new growth will ease the pain of the death that came before it. Not erase it, but ease the pain. Also possibly dull us to the lesson that we could have learned if we'd spent more time feeling the pain of the loss. I feel like there's a lot to think about with this card. Again, I feel like the bug doesn't look like a bee to me. The more that I look at it, it looks more like a cicada. And those are bugs that dig deep into the ground and resurface after many years. Isn't that the case? I feel like I need to study up on my cicada. I also know that they cause a racket and that they leave their shells behind and they emerge fresh. Those are all rich clues that help us to meditate on what death means to us. And again, sure, it could mean death of a person, but more likely it's death of an idea or a time in our life or a relationship or, the hard end to a situation that there's no going back from. And every time I see the death card, it makes me think of another deck that I have. And someday I'll use that deck and I'll point out that card when I use that other deck. The Five of Vessels. Interesting. All right. Well, the Five of Vessels speak to the part of our lives, though, the way that we know the world through our emotions, our feelings, our intuition, our subconscious. They have to do with creativity too. So you can tell from looking at this card that there's some hard feelings going on here. There's some loss. Some of these are beyond saving. They're being watered by tears. Whereas over here, there's a couple here that are still living and they're being watered by rain clouds. The Five of Vessels speaks of grief. And I think everyone is inclined to want to move past the grief piece when they look at this card. As it's how I learned the card. It's just like, oh yeah, you're feeling really bad, and you're really crying, and there's loss, sure, but look, there's still some things living. Don't focus on this. And I feel like that's legitimate, but I feel like we're always in too big of a hurry to say, don't worry too much about this part over here. Think about this part over here. And that's a mistake. The major arcana is also death. So, this is a loss. And this is the loss that it's speaking about, right? So, yeah, absolutely. Do move on. Let that puppy grow and, feel better. Take the medicine, feel better. That's great. But don't be in such a hurry to do it either. Yes, there's a path, but feel the grief. Don't feel pressured. Don't pressure yourself to move past the grief. There's a lot to be learned here. And even if you don't invest yourself in learning in the moment, just the feeling of it. What happens when we feel our grief? What happens when we allow ourselves to feel grief? Is there something that you can value in that? I mean, obviously, I think yes, there is. And I think you probably think so too. Whether or not you're willing to say, like, in the moment, feeling grief is freaking horrible. It's gut-wrenching. It's the freaking worst. And we might have a value like connected to grief and feeling grief and learning, and again, forget learning, seriously, how about just feeling? Obviously that's a lot of our compassion comes from, like, really feeling our feelings. We grow as a person when we really spend time with our grief. And we don't hurry past this. And if we give ourselves the time, if we insist upon feeling difficult feelings, that is where our compassion grows. That is where we carve out that bowl that allows us a richer understanding of all of our feelings. Okay, that's enough philosophizing. But yes, there is a way out of it. Yes, there are other things going on. No, it's not all grief, and that's what this speaks to. But the next card is a court card. The Traveler of Stones. The Traveler card. Traveler is the action of the suit, right? So in the court, we've got the page, or in this, we'd have the student, not the page. So the youngest embodiment, the least experienced embodiment of the suit, which is the stones. The Traveler Stones in particular, I'll tell you about travelers and students and visionaries and architects, possibly. But stones, the element is earth, and it speaks to the part of our lives that's very, very much in the material world, very much in, not lost in thought or in feelings or in passions, but the part of ourselves that is engaged in work in really practical ways. Our body, the money that we make, the job that we show up to every day, right? Chop wood, carry water business. So the Traveler of Stones, to me, I always think of these stones as being like seeds too. I feel like this hand is scattering stones, but stones in the way that peach pits are stones. The travelers are the action of the suit. And most travelers in the tarot are heedlessly moving forward. The Traveler of Stones is the exception. Traveler of Stones is methodical, definitely doing the work of the stones, but moving thoughtfully, moving forward, building upon what came before it. I said thoughtfully and then I changed it because stones aren't about thoughts, they're about working. So the Traveler of Stones is building on what's come before it and planting seeds, building foundations, creating channels. These seeds seem to be falling into water, right? So there's some emotion, but we're planting seeds in creating, like, willfully engaging in the future with our actions. Planting seeds, dropping seeds is engaging in the future, but in the moment, in a real physical, manifest way. So these really go together nicely as far as I can tell, right? There's been an end to something, and there's grief. And there's different ways of dealing with the grief. Whether or not you deal with it, something new is going to come out of it. And the way that we move forward, this feeling, the element of the vessels is water. And we're moving through this desolate landscape, but we're just doing the work. We're moving forward, maybe not touching our feelings, maybe not engaging with our feelings as we move forward, but we're actively engaging in the future by doing the work, planting the seeds, building the foundations for what comes next, whether or not we're connected to the feelings and emotions that go along with that, or this is a disembodied hand. All this is work, but it's the work is getting done, and it's these seeds or these stones are falling into water that will eventually, when it's the right mixture of earth and water and magic, will create the future. So I think that holds together really nicely. And hopefully you can think about these 3 cards this week and think about ways in which you can engage with the ideas here. And if you have some ideas of different ways of tying these together, or something that these different cards make you think of, please let me know. I would love to get into a discussion. I get tired of hearing my own voice. I would love to do this with someone else. And if you have any questions about this particular reading, or if you have something that you want to ask an open question about, the tarot cards, we could use the tarot cards to, focus our attention and dig in on it with, I would love to hear what you're thinking about. Thanks so much for listening.